In the program called What's Going On FlintTalkRadio.com. I'm George Moss, the host of the program that comes on at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We stay here for an hour. And today we will not be followed by Satura's Black History Corner because it comes on every second and fourth Mondays. But we are here every Monday without exception, unless I'm flying out of the country and then I can't do the program from abroad because of the technology disparity between what we have here in this country, which I appreciate a lot more when I go outside the boundaries of the country, and what they have over there where you're more limited in terms of what you can do as far as the internet, something as simple as that. We take a lot of things for granted here in this country, and we fail to realize some of the things that we do have, that we better start beginning to think about how we're going to keep the things that we have, because we're losing those things every day.
Well, yeah, because Obama wants us to lose our cell phones and shut off our cable so we can afford his Obamacare. I mean, isn't that, I have never heard a president be so arrogant about, I created this problem for you, and you just better adjust to it.
Yeah, John, it's frightening to think about what this guy stands for, and the fact we got 2 more years of this man's nonsense. And I'm a living witness to the fact that I'm going to fight against what I see as the tyranny of this administration. And they have an implacable foe. Not that I shouldn't say implacable. They have one that is not going to back down from the task of pointing out what this man really stands for and what he represents. We got the mother of all battles on our hands, and we got 2 more years of this man's madness, which he could not get away with half the things he gets away with if he were not, in fact, the first quote-unquote black president, which somebody pointed out this weekend, that if this man was not acknowledged as the first black president, the first acknowledged black president, because he's not really the first black president, some were black presidents in disguise. The melanin, they were able to pass the melanin test. But if this man were not acknowledged as the first black president, then he would have been impeached a long time ago with the kind of things he's doing, much of which is in fact in defiance of the Constitution and restrictions placed upon him as the CEO of the country. His duty is being spelled out in Article 2 of the Constitution, but nobody else. And I'm going to, now that we got into that, I'm going to talk about that just a little bit, although I came to the studio to talk about a post that I did just before coming to the studio. And it ended up, as most of my posts ended up being a 2-part series that I have to finish up tomorrow, because when I start typing my narrative, my intention is to do a one-parter, and go on to something else. But then you start writing it, and before you know it, you're at page 2 and then 3. This one was about 4 pages long, and I realized that I haven't even really gotten to the meat of what I want to, and the meat and the potatoes, what I really want to say on this subject. The subject being that of writing about Uncle Tom. And you know something, I'm not really interested in regurgitating a lot of information, because I don't think people have actually hit upon the major themes. And I always try to open up some new areas of understanding that nobody else has hit upon, because I'm not one of those persons that just really revel in regurgitating what has already been said. Which is also to say that I'm not a liberal, because that's all liberals do. Once you hear one person talking, you can believe this, that he got that from the other guy, who got it from the other person, who got it from these other people, and before you know it, now he's up here sounding like a parrot. But I'm going to open up some things here on the air waves this afternoon, some things I just wrote about and just finished that nobody else has ever not only written about, but haven't even thought about. And we'll open up that can of worms at the end of the program. But since we're talking about this this president and what he is doing in Washington and what this administration stands for, if you look at what is taking place, there are a couple of things I think we ought to be paying attention to. One of which is we got to begin to think about why it is that we are dealing with more and more of what really amounts to the kind of enclosure we were talking about last week. If you notice it, for example, the person has been nominated for the Surgeon General, which is really a position you would think would be kind of neutral and has nothing to do with any of the politics that we see being played in the political arena by this administration. You would think that would be one of the few, if not, you think a lot of them would be the exception to the rule, but you think this would be certainly an exception to the rule of the politics this administration stands for. But the man that's been nominated for the Surgeon General's job, I thought that position was about health and things of that sort. Now this man is talking about guns, owning guns as a health care issue. So this idea that we've left the Second Amendment, finally that's going to be left in place, and we're going to finally begin to respect it, back off of its attackers. This guy is talking about gun ownership as a health care issue. So we're seeing this is another frontal attack where they just simply back up and then you're not paying attention. They come back at you through another door, and because they're not going to leave the issue once they're opening it up. And once you pay attention to it to find out if people are really looking and listening to what's taking place in Washington, they come back through another door they open up. And that's how I see this guy. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, because the NRA, this organization is always vigilant in terms of looking out for those scoundrels in Washington who want to try to take our guns from us, because they need those guns, but what they have in mind, and that's just only one part of it. The other thing is that they are trying to buy time until they put all of the strictures in place that they have to put in place, because of the economy. The bottom of the economy has already fallen out. It's just that it has not yet been surfaced yet. The bottom, some things that go on under the ground, so to speak, you don't realize it is there until the root of it comes to the surface. And a seed, it's like that, goes in the ground, then it pushes the stem out, and you say, "Oh, okay, I didn't know the plant was even there," but it's already in place. The collapse already occurred in the American economy, and I don't know what people are talking about in terms of being the richest country in the world, and you're the biggest debtor in the world, owning 1/3 of the world's debt. So I don't know where that narrative comes from, other than people are delusional and do not really understand what they're looking at, even though they're looking directly at it. But they know the collapse has occurred, and what they're doing now, because they are the ones who caused it, and have no vested interest in pointing out the collapse, which they have in fact brought about upon this country, which tells you really, by the way, how destructive politicians are, because the politicians are the most destructive force on the planet. And for them to be able to bring this country down to its knees after it had for 50 years the greatest standing in the world, standing for liberty, equality of opportunity, and things of that sort, is written into its own fundamental laws in the Constitution, spelled out also in the Declaration of Independence, the founding documents of this country, which set the paradigm for the rest of the world. Now it is, in fact, following other parts of the world after giving the idea, following after them, because it no longer stands for the things it stood for the length of time that it did. And for the last so many years, I think probably in the last 50 years, we've seen an erosion of that taking place. And look at where we are right now, where we are following the lead of other nations that have taken the ideas from us and run with them. And we're no longer that place that we keep talking about because we have a memory of it. But if you think that's what we're standing for right now, you're not paying attention. And they are putting things in place because they know that eventually this unsustainable course, everybody talks about it, that we're on an unsustainable course, but few understand the implications of that. If you're on an unsustainable course, meaning that you can't do what you're doing right now, which is a cover-up, then what happens when they stop doing that which is a cover-up? And people are now aware, because of the inability of the system to deliver what it's delivering right now under all these kinds of artificial means. What happens then when they can't deliver because they're unable to continue to borrow at the level they're borrowing at, and they're unable to print what amounts to fictional or what I call counterfeit currency. What happens when they cannot do that anymore in terms of destroying and debasing the dollar? Which you see evidence of that if you just would open your eyes up and just open your eyes to what's going on, even as you go to the store, and see how it plays out in terms of how everything is going up. And you're blaming the cashier for it, or blaming the person at the counter for it. But the reason why everything is going up is because they're in fact debasing the dollar and destroying it, which is what politicians always do when they're at the very end of the road that they paved in body bags with our children, with our children's future. I'm going to be writing a post maybe in Wednesday of this week, because I've got to finish up part 2 of the narrative on Uncle Tom. But I think I'll be writing this post on Wednesday this week on Facebook. Where there are a lot of people that have great dialogue on a network. We better use it while we can, because they don't want us to have even that as a way of having the free flow of ideas. They want to control the ideas, which is why they get involved in all the technologies that's created by the free market, and then they grab it and use it against us. Because these people are tyrants. And there's no laughing matter, because what they want is our freedoms, and they pretty much have gotten in the saddle, riding around, in the saddle and riding around where our freedoms are, and they are just simply surrounding our freedoms and taking them from us one at a time. And if you think that they are not coming after the liberties you have left, the few liberties that are still out there that we have in this country, they want those too. Now, I saw this debate. It wasn't much of a debate. They had this guy named Moore, is his last name, one of the founders of the Greenpeace, this organization, this network that was created. I can't think of his first name. His last name is Moore. And he was supposed to be in a debate with one of the members of the 5 on Fox Network, Bob Beckel. And you would think that the liberals would find some way to bring some information to the table so that they're actually having a debate. And Beckel did what was par for the course of liberals. When they're debating someone that has information, they resort to name calling. And all Beckel was doing, those of you who saw it, you know what I'm talking about. All Beckel did was, in fact, to go through, you step down from Greenpeace, and then you go over here, and then you do this. And the man's trying to talk about science, what the scientific evidence talks about in terms of global warming. But he was talking about the fact, and we all can verify this because we've looked at the data also, and looked at the numbers in terms of the degree of the so-called increase in global warming that's occurred on the earth in the last 17 years. I think about 1 degree over the last 50 years or so. And they're trying to act like the earth is burning up. Well, the earth is not burning up, and the globe is not warming based upon anything that mankind is in fact doing, based upon the scientific information that they have. And when I read what they write in their reports, I see the same kinds of disclaimers in how they express it that we see in what Obama said when he talked about you can keep your doctor and how much money you're going to save. Because when you say, for example, and use language like that the health care, the so-called Affordable Care Act, will save you up to $2,500. I have to tell you something. There's no point being made there, because it's just like a person saying that you can lose up to 25 pounds. And you think they said you're going to lose 25 pounds. But if you lose 1 ounce, that's in the ballpark, because up to means you'll lose something, and it may be up to 25. It don't necessarily have to rise that level. If you lose 1 ounce, they didn't lie. And so when they start telling you that you can save up to $2,500, if you save a dime, if you save 1 penny, that's up to $2,500 because it includes everything. Any amount of money that you save is in the ballpark, because what they did was talk in sound bites, which meant they were talking around in circles, which means where the language is so scripted and is so unspecific, lacking in specificity to the power of 10 squared times 10 squared. There's no point being made there. And you think that they were talking about saving you $2,500 when they had a caveat there, meaning that anything that you save up to. And some of us are not going to save anything. We're going to actually have our premiums increase. But then they start talking about the average would be up to $2,500, which means that maybe a penny a piece stretched throughout the economy. But they didn't lie. They just simply, well, they lied, but they hid their lying underneath a disclaimer that we didn't pick up because we're not really paying close attention to how language is in fact used, so that they are doing what politicians do, which is talking around in circles. But I don't look. My point would be to you that do not believe anything that politicians say. And when they start talking about they are doing this because of the common good and for the good of the American people, particularly when it comes down to our children, now that's one for the ages, that they are doing this for the future. And I wrote down, I was looking at this as the program was coming on. I want to read what I wrote in terms of just one point that I wrote down that I wanted to make sure I didn't forget. Now, here these people are talking about they are interested in global warming because of the potential for the hazards it brings to the future. And here these people are spending $18 trillion of our children's money, mainly because they're not here to vote. And they're imposing, I wrote this down, imposing decisions upon the next generation before the next generation is even born. You know, when you think about that, and when I think about it, I don't want to hear any politician tell me about how they feel about the next generation. That right there, that ends that conversation. Because if there was concern about the next generation would not be saddled with this debt by these corrupt, crooked, lying, deceitful, cunning politicians, none of whom can be trusted. We got to get real in this country. And getting real means getting rid of some things. Number one, getting rid of incumbency for any extended period of time. I don't want to be reading, I hope my grandchildren, well, I don't have any grandchildren, your grandchildren. I hope that nobody's grandchildren will have to read about some politician in Washington retiring after 50 years, which is what John Dingell is going to be doing. I know you're going to be celebrating, giving him all kinds of accolades. He probably get a gold watch too, like I did when I retired after so many years in the classroom and then 3 years in the principalship. These guys are retiring after 58 years of being in elected positions. They got to go to the voter. He had to go to the voter for 58 years. Had to go there 29 times because he's in the House and asking the voters to renew his membership in the club. This is what it is. You know how they have these exercise clubs. He's up there exercising, running his mouth, and they have to renew their club membership, which is all that really is about, renewing their membership. Had to go to the voters, never had any egg on his face, never seemed to be embarrassed, and asked them to renew his club membership 29 different times. And nobody ever thought in that district, apparently, not the majority certainly, that what kind of person do you know of that has any new ideas that he has already unleashed upon the public because they're concerned about the well-being of the of the public, not ever concerned enough to move to the side. Let's let us come in and bring their ideas to the table. They want to stay there. And for 58 years doing public service that they couldn't have done, let's say, in the first 3 terms. Because I want to give them the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, at least give them the same number of years they have in the Senate, which is 1 term, is 6 years. And if they stay there more than 2 terms, which is 12 years, I mean, what would be the point of that? Because if you can't get out what you want to contribute, I'll give you 1 term and say maybe not in 1 term. There's some other stuff that you want to do, couldn't get done, so you're going to do a 2nd term. When you tell me that you've been in that body for 30, 40, and in Dingo's case, 58 years, you're dealing with a tyrant. And he may well be one that disguises it by going to the voters. And why should he come out and announce it or let his tyranny be known if, in fact, he can appeal to the voters to place him in office and let him exercise that with their permission? Can we understand that you don't have to be Joseph Stalin? You can just have to sound like him and act like him in terms of what you do once you get there, as long as people will, in fact, endorse your tyranny by simply not recognizing that that's what they're looking at. But what else is it? And if you think that $18 trillion is public service, I'd like to go back and look at how much of that was in fact done while Dingo was there, and what objections did he make to it. What's this guy? This one guy down in Florida, they just had an election for his position because at the age of 82, he had been there 42 years. This guy named Williams, Charles Williams Young, he wanted his voters to call him Bill. So they felt Bill can go in there, not Bob, Bill could go in there and just simply put him in there. He was elected 21 times. After the initial election, he was elected 20 more times. And the man died in office at age 82. And probably had planned to run again. He hadn't announced like Waxman over there in California that he was going to step down in November 2014, and Waxman's running because he understands what's getting ready to happen, because the Democrats are not going to have the majority after the election is over, because we saw what happened down there in Florida for Young's seat. But there was Young getting ready to run again, and this man died in office. He was 82 years old. When should we expect these persons to leave? When is John McCain going to leave? And really, when is Mitch McConnell going to leave if we don't put him out to pasture in this election? Now, John McCain comes up in 2016. But Mitch McConnell is up for election right now. And I want to see what happens in Kentucky. And I don't have any confidence. People had on the wall, they had, one of my friends in Detroit put up there, who do you support between Rand Paul and Ted Cruz? To me, it's not even a question. You know why? Because I was watching Rand Paul down in Kentucky. That's his state he was voted in from. I think he took over, I could be wrong on this, but I think he took over the seat from Bunny, the baseball player who was doctoring up the baseball, according to some people, throwing the spitter. and then he goes to the Senate. So I, follow him up there and find out what he was doing up there in that seat. But Rand Paul has, endorsed Mitch McConnell. Now, don't forget, Rand Paul was a Tea Party member. He rode the coattails of the Tea Party, rode it all the way up to the Senate. And they got Matt Bevins is now opposing Mitch McConnell, who was standing in the way of the Tea Party members, has said he's going after the Tea Party. He not said that he's going to try to win his seat. He's not satisfied with that. But he's so comfortable because of the margin that they're showing that this man is leading by, and I'm sure it's going to tighten up as they get close to the election, because they're going to begin to look at this man again, and look at this businessman, Matt Bevins, that brings a resume there. As it tightens up, I think you'll see McConnell trying to run to the crack. He's already running, because I saw him up there holding a gun up as CPAC. Didn't even know how to hold a gun. He probably didn't even own a gun.
I think it's really bizarre is that these people who got, pushed in by the Tea Party, and I got some issues personally with the Tea Party. I mean, I've been to a few of their events, and people are kind of hard to get along with. I just didn't really, and I'm on board for the ideas, but they were just kind of confrontational and kind of belligerent, the ones the events I went to. So I'm not on board with everything, but but I just think it's arrogance that these people who are saying they're attacking the Tea Party. These guys who are the congressmen and the senators are going after them, saying vicious stuff. When actually the Tea Party and the NRA, these are organizations that are basically voicing the concerns of the people who have these same concerns. They're actually more of a voice for the population than they are, who are supposed to be. They're not even wanting listening to their constituencies. They just want to do something along with political party lines or to get along. Well, I don't want them to get along. I want them to argue stuff out. And these guys, they're attacking the Tea Party, and they rode them, like you were just saying. They got pushed in or rode in on the coattails, and now they're attacking them. Mm-hmm. That's like arrogance beyond belief.
It is beyond belief, and it shows the sweetheart relationship that exists in Washington, and they don't want anyone coming in, interfering, interrupting, and changing that sweetheart relationship that the two parties have with each other in the comfort zone they've established in Washington. This is a Washington establishment, and it has two different components to it, and those two components are the two political parties. And here comes the Tea Party expecting to have these politicians to restrict their power and place it back underneath the Constitution, and they don't intend to do that. And that's why the Tea Party was in fact formed. My experience with the Tea Party is a little bit different than John's, but I do understand what John is saying. But my experience is different. I have to worry when I go to a Tea Party gathering or being licked to death, and I have to fight my way out of there, particularly when I say a few things on the floor and they can't believe that a black person is saying that because they listen to Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, and they think, and they don't have a lot of contact with blacks because blacks are not over there in the Republican Party. They're too brainwashed to get off the Democratic Party plantation.
Wasn't it Charles Barkley? I think Charles Barkley said, you guys have been voting for Democrats for 80 years now and you're still poor.
Yeah, Charles Barkley.
Charles Barkley said that, yeah.
Charles Barkley is one of the real clear thinkers in terms of the political arena. Sometimes he goes beyond the pale in some of the things he says on the air. I don't think he should have mixed basketball in with the election coming up in 2012 as he did, but there are some things he says that are very profound, and that's one of the things I give him a lot of credit for. And I give him a lot of credit for what he did in terms of the Trayvon Martin tragedy, where he was very clear in terms of something went very wrong, and it had nothing to do with George Zimmerman defending his life. So I have a lot of respect for him because he's not one of those persons that can't think out of the box and do some thinking on his own, which I don't see very many people doing because he's not a liberal, and that explains some of it. But I just have a different experience with the Tea Party, and I do think that they are an insurgency group that has come about because they understand that both parties in Washington are out of control, and we need some intervention to get them back to understand that they're not we're not in a dictatorship here, not yet anyway. We have constraints placed upon their power. We have a document that places those restraints called the Constitution of the United States, and they want to place them back underneath those restraints because they've broken those restraints and no longer recognize they even exist. That's why they never talk about the Constitution.
It's another thing too. It's like I was watching this thing on Netflix. It's a documentary on Ayn Rand, and they're talking about the Atlas Shrugged movie, in the book and all that, and her struggle to get that book published initially, and if you get a chance, you should probably watch that. It's really interesting. And they were talking. They had to cut the cuts two different protests going on from the Tea Party, and they were making so salient points. And what I'd like to know about as much as I had some issues with the Tea Party, I don't know how these politicians want to sit around and turn it, and now they want to attack members of the voting public. People who belong to us, like the NRA, and they're so like, oh look, they hate they go against the Koch brothers. Oh, that's not fair. They had these billionaires raising money. When they have people like George Lucas, Spielberg, and all these people giving them billions of dollars over the years, what's the difference? Oh, because they're on the same political. It's the Koch brothers are the boogeyman for the left, just like George Soros is for the people on the right and the libertarian camps. The Koch brothers, they just make demeaning things. Well, they donate money. Well, okay, you guys get billions of dollars from your voting base. So what the hell's the difference?
Yeah. Did you see? I don't know if you saw yesterday the program, Chris Wallace's program on Fox. They had George Wills made a point about the Koch brothers. He was saying that the left always wants to bring up how the Koch brothers are influencing elections and things of that sort. He said, but in Florida, where they were voting for the seat that was once held by C.W. Young, there was not the New York Times, and we can believe this because they're not willing to give any slack to the Republicans and to the Tea Party, but they had to admit there was not one dime of the Koch brothers' money put into that campaign. And if that does not send a message, in fact, in that campaign, the persons down there, they brought all the heavyweights in there. They brought in Clinton and some others of the heavyweights on the national level, and they still lost their seat. And they outspent the person that won. They outspent him 4-1. And so if the Democrats, they're trying to act like, well, it doesn't portend anything for the election in November, but you can believe this, behind the scenes they're running scared. Because for that election, this person, by the way, that lost was a statewide known figure, and they were opposed by a person that wasn't well known. If you don't think those Democrats are running scared and don't see the handwriting on the wall, I don't care what they say in public. That was a wake-up call, and they know what is on the horizon in November, because the American people are awakening right now, because they took this issue of Obamacare into their living rooms and into their bedrooms and into their pocketbooks. And that is something that even those who are politically asleep understand when you hit them where they live. And so this is not going to go well for the Democrats, and that's why they're trying to run to the isolation booths and trying to isolate themselves from Obama. Don't want to be seen with him, don't want to talk to him, don't want him in their district, and don't want to even take any credit for Obamacare, although all of them voted for it without any exception when it was in fact on the table, and reiterated their support for it during the so-called government shutdown. The Democratic Party is in trouble, but I don't want to stop there. I want to look at these Democrats in the Republican Party. You can claim rhinos. I don't even know what that means. Republican in name only. Is it the Republican Party or something to write home about? They're Democrats too, just not as obvious with it. I hear it in what they talk about when they talk about they can reach across the aisle. You ever hear any Democrats talk about reaching across the aisle? I have never heard a Democrat talking about he want to reach over where those Republicans are. So then why do the Republicans always talk about reaching over there where the Democrats are? You know why? Because they're Democrats. For example, and I'll get to my Uncle Tom narrative today before I leave the air, because I want you to read that article that I did. This is part one of a two-part series, because I opened up some doors that no one has not only never written about, but haven't thought about. And I don't expect any liberal to think about it because they're so much in lockstep with all the other liberals, they can't do any independent thinking. So I don't expect anything of independence to come from their train of thinking because there's no thinking over there. One person says it, and then it's monkey see, monkey do from that point until eternity. And to talk to people trying to change people's mind is a waste of time, and that's why I don't even want to have a conversation with them. And I said that in my post as I closed out today. That's why I came to the studio a little bit late, because it seems like when I'm getting ready to come to the studio, people know I'm getting ready to leave the house to get here on time, and then everybody start getting on my wall, come in my chat room. One person wrote me and wanted me to read a long thing she put on my chat. Can you look at this? And I said, oh, very interesting. Why don't you post it? Well, what do you think about it? Well, I don't have enough time to be looking at it at like 1:30. But I told her I'll look at it when I get back to the house. But no, I think we've got to look at the situation politically and look at what we're dealing with and see what role the Tea Party is playing and who is in fact supportive of it and who's not supportive of it. If we like small government, anyone that's in fact throwing a monkey wrench in those that are advocating it has got to be seen as a political target we got to have. And Rand Paul, who's running for president, you can't tell me that you were supported by the Tea Party, get up there and then endorse a person that's attacking the Tea Party at every front. And then you're endorsing them when they got a Tea Party candidate running against them. I don't even know anything else about Rand Paul. Rand Paul talking out of both sides of his mouth.
He's more of an opportunistic than his dad is.
Yes, he is.
He doesn't have the moral fiber his dad had. I think he wants to. I don't think he has anything else going for him. His dad had been a pediatrician, obstetrician, or gynecologist, or something like that. It was an OBGYN. His dad was. So he doesn't have that going for him or something. So maybe he's betting on this political thing lasting for a while. But I also don't think he's as committed to the principles as his father was.
I don't see. After that, I don't see any commitment on his part. I do see opportunism here because you got to be consistent. If the Tea Party has installed Rand Paul in his office, and that's the wave that they rode all the way to his present seat, then how do you explain his behavior in supporting a person that has been vehemently opposed to what the Tea Party is in fact up there doing? He didn't disagree with John McCain when John McCain called the Tea Party members, people like Ted Cruz, who was also a Tea Party candidate out of Texas, and called them a bunch of yahoos. And he wasn't talking about the internet. And he's going to come out and they're going to talk about these were some real yo-yos up there that was in fact trying to keep the Obamacare from coming through and doing this kamikaze on the American economy and tearing up the greatest healthcare system in the world. And look at what they were saying about it. Look at how Mitch McConnell was against it.
Look, I'd like to bring a point very brief about the healthcare. It's like they always talk. People say, "Well, you had to have that." The people want to get, they want to get insurance. They want to get coverage. Well, Hurley Hospital here locally, we'll just use as an example. They take all the indigent cases, pretty much, of any of the hospitals in Flint. 2 years ago, I read that they actually did that, treated all these people, got the money from the federal government, like as compensation for treating people who didn't have insurance. They still made a profit of $1 million.
Yes, right.
$1 million, even though they took all the people who are uninsured, people who have pre-existing conditions, who can't get insurance, and they still made $1 million from the current way it was running. Now, why can't we just tweak what we had going, change it around, and make it, if we got to have that, so if we got to have something like this, why embrace a system that's going to have a whole different infrastructure build up, which is going to cost in itself billions of dollars? So, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, and John, and you're aware of Stefan Malino.
Yeah, he's really good.
He is really good. And he would say the reason why what you just described occurs is because there's no gun in the room. He makes this point that when you bring a gun into the room, then force is automatically put into place, and you cannot have cost reduced when force is present. And when you have a free market operative, even though you are treating people that can't pay and things of that sort, but because so much of the free market is still left, it doesn't end the profit motive. But when you have government come in and use force where it's total, such as, let me give you an example. such as when you have minimum wage. The reason why in minimum wage, I know what the economists are going to say. They're going to say go wherever the price of something goes up, the demand for it, in fact, goes down. That's true. That's true in terms of products, and it's also true of labor. Here's the other part of it. When you bring government force, the gun in the room, into demanding that the minimum wage is 10.10, which is what this guy up there in Washington has said he's going to do right now for federal contractors, because he wants to first of all get the foot in the door to make it comprehensive throughout the economy. That's the idea of it. See if you protest it at that level. If not, then they get the rest of it. And so, which is what the federal government always does. But the problem with that proposition is that the reason why you have people laid off and it doesn't grow jobs is because the government has made it illegal to hire anybody underneath that wage. In other words, hiring someone for nine an hour, that's part of Herman Cain's position, they made it illegal to hire folks. That's the gun in the room that nobody talks about when the government brings force to the table. And it drives up costs and it drives up unemployment. It will always be the case because the gun in the room adds costs. It will always add costs.
Well, I'd like to know, too, that the congressmen, senators who voted for this, Affordable Care Act, okay, they think that they don't address the price of actually delivering the services on the end of those who are the care providers. Okay, so they're simply by saying we won't pay you anymore doesn't cover their costs. So basically, they're face a dilemma. Either I try to make it with what they're going to offer me, or I'm going to have to close up shop. Now, we're not the really business people, which if a doctor is a business person in a large degree of that. And he's got to wear 2 or 3 hats simultaneously. A politician just got to wear one, which means he can take the power he's got to level a gun, like you're talking about, to people's heads. The doctor just can't say, let's get everybody else to vote for me for a pay increase, like congressmen and senators do. Mm-hmm. So, you're not even, the Affordable Care Act didn't even address the cost of what is behind the cost of delivering the health care. They just said mandate. Well, we're not going to pay for that. That's we're not going to allow you to have it that price. Mm-hmm. That doesn't address the issue. Is everybody who's supposed to work in the healthcare field become a public servant making $20,000 a year? I mean, they want to. How are they going to keep the better people on board for that? Mm-hmm. So I mean, the Affordable Care Act does not afford. I mean, it doesn't address the affordability of it. Yeah. I mean, it's so misnamed. I mean,
mm-hmm. It is misnamed, and it's misnamed deliberately because it does not do, nor can it do, that which is in fact promised. If you notice that whenever force is brought into the room, whatever the thing was that was intended, it will always have the opposite effect, because you can't have the effect that you claim it will have, the positive effect, if in fact force is brought to the table. It's only in the options that are available to you through the free relationship in terms of trade. In the marketplace, you have to have options open. He can do this or he can do something else. If you close off those options, you necessarily have added costs. And this idea they're going to save anything in terms of what they are prescribing through the use of force, that's why it never has worked. See, we need to stay around when the government gets involved in something. We need to stay around long enough to see what was intended and what was the effect of what was intended. And you'll always notice it's always the opposite effect. And also notice what they call something. If they call something Affordable Care Act, that means you can't afford it. If they call something the Patriot Act, look for a lack of patriotism from top to bottom. There's nothing patriotic about that.
And if you protest against the Patriot Act, you're considered unpatriotic.
You're unpatriotic. That's why we have a confusion about who this person is that they ran out of the country. I mean, if this guy is a traitor, folks, if that is true, then who are the patriots? I mean, if they're the patriots up there in Washington, then why is it that the IRS had no presumption that they were offending anybody in Washington by going after those that had patriot in their name? They didn't feel they offended the Republicans. And they certainly feel that they were embarrassing or setting off or making upset the communists, the Democrats. They didn't believe that. And that's why they went after him. Did you see any of those guys squealing about that up there? I mean, I'm talking about the John Boehners. And look, all they did was wait until the public put his attention elsewhere. For example, on the nomination of this guy who they now want to make the Surgeon General, and I'll be over there talking about that. We should talk about that. We should defeat this guy. But do not think that if you don't pay attention to the IRS, they've already forgotten about Benghazi, that they're going to, in fact, find out, what happened. And America, I got to tell you something. I don't believe you sometimes, because if you think that Hillary Clinton is going to be the nominee and you're going to vote for her or anyone else they put up there, and you don't care who the person is. And we got 4 Americans that died over there, and she was Secretary of State at that time, and you're going to put up there as a commander-in-chief. I mean, we got to, we got to begin to talk about, your psychology in terms of where your head is.
Another thing is too, the Democratic Party, with if they did that, if they allow her to be nominated and she gets elected, it just shows a contempt for the military. I think we're all over the world too much. Okay, as a military, but once you put them in the field, you're responsible for their support and their,
absolutely,
and give them the support so they can do what your intended objective was. But now these people, I see a potential for revolt in the military ranks against Hillary Clinton because of the repeated abuse and the sheer arrogance that her husband displayed during the time of his being the commander-in-chief, then Obama's administration, then her role with Benghazi, or lack of the role that she took in Benghazi. I can see that there's going to be fomenting some real serious animosity in the ranks of the military leaders.
I agree with you. John, they've already purged the military. And some of the ones that were, because they asked them, would you fire upon the American people? Now, some of those in the military were very open with their answer, and they said they would not do that. They were pushed over to the side.
Well, they'll do just exactly what they did with the Surgeon General. They're bringing in somebody who was foreign-born, who doesn't have the royalties, doesn't see the importance of protecting the Constitution. Not that I'm saying he's okay. Maybe it sounds racist, but he was of Indian family, born in England. Why are we always bringing these people? I mean, I had problems with Kissinger being in the role he was in.
Because
why are we bringing these foreigners in? They have such a big impact on our foreign policy or whatever. Why are we trusting it to foreigners?
Yeah, because they're anti-American.
Right.
And we see that in terms of almost everything that they're doing. But what I was going to say about the military, there was some that they purged because they were out in the open with their answers. There were some others that are there, and this goes what John was saying about the problems that Hillary Clinton would have as the CEO, the commander-in-chief, as a matter of fact, given to the president in Article 2 of the Constitution, is that there are some in the military who are more clandestine in terms of answering that question, and they stay there so as to have an influence in case some orders that are untoward and are circuitous in terms of how they go around the Constitution. They're there because they want to be in a place to interfere with those kinds of orders. So there could be some problems down the line if you get the wrong person in there, because some of them did not come out and say they would in fact do this, and they were not purged, and they understood that they had to stay around because they have to be in a position to come to the aid of the American people. These people are the patriots, and they understand that there are no pictures in Washington. When I say none, I don't mean absolute terms here. I'm talking about in terms of any numbers that are significant, in terms of numbers that are needed in order to, in fact, rule the day in terms of what's going to happen. In other words, it's not consequential. The numbers are not large enough, anywhere near being large enough, to turn the tide in terms of what's going on in Washington. We need a total overhaul of what's happening in terms of Congress, and this president is going to be leaving in 2017, knock on wood for that, on January the 20th of that year, and it'll be, sayonara, or whatever the word is, he's out of here. And hopefully we can undo some of the things he's done while he was in office. These 8 years he'll be in office. But we're going to have some persons that will go in there and then undo some of the damage that's been done. If they go in there just simply take over that which they have inherited, that doesn't do the job. We got to begin to wind down the influence of the federal government. I saw something, though, that was very encouraging, and it seems like it's going to have to come out of the South because they were the ones that rose up in 1860, and I saw something that was very encouraging in Georgia, where the state legislature has voted to rescind Obamacare. I mean, it's called the Affordable Care Act. Can you get to that? It's affordable by raising up your rates, and that they care enough about you so that they passed this. They didn't call it Obamacare, Affordable Care Act.
Yeah, let's see. You have a man who spent $100 million in vacations for he and his family and his friends, telling everybody else who basically has to have some kind of phone to lose their cell phones and cut their cable so they can pay for this allegedly affordable. I mean, the sheer arrogance of that. A guy who has done nothing. I mean, I guess they said give him a break. This is his first job. Mm-hmm. Okay, I mean, serious. I mean, what has he done in his life?
Nothing. And John, this guy can't even spell respect. This guy doesn't even know how many states there are.
I mean, well, it's because he wasn't born here. I mean, he wasn't raised here. I mean, whatever. Maybe he was born in Hawaii. I don't know. But, I mean, still, I guess Kennedy's are still proud of him, though. I mean, that's one shining spot in his life.
Well, his brother George over there in Kenya's not proud of him because Dinesh D'Souza, I was watching some of his videos this weekend, and he was saying that his brother, George, his half-brother, called him and asked him if he would give him $1,000. And he said, well, thought he would be the last one that George would appeal to for money. I mean, his brother is a millionaire. Why wouldn't he appeal to him? And after making that point, he did, send $1,000 over there because he was in one of the films made by Dinesh D'Souza. But isn't it interesting that this president wants us to be so benevolent and giving and charitable in terms of money we made, and he's got a brother over there in Kenya, and his brother's over there needing $1,000. I mean, how many thousands is $1 million? That's 1,000,000. And out of that $1,000, you can't afford 1,000 sent to your brother. What does that tell you about this man that's in the White House? It tells you that charity is what he thinks you should be doing. That's what he's telling Joe DiPloma about. That I think it's a good thing to be charitable. Sure, it's charitable if it's somebody else's money.
I'd like to know.
I call it real theft.
Charity is actually a connection to somebody you feel their importance and you want to help them out. This is coercion. I mean, and that's what that thing was about. The whole thing about Ayn Rand's.
Tell me about the coercion part.
She didn't mind giving money to people she felt she wanted to give it to them.
Sure.
But that's charity. That means care. I mean, it's form of love, I guess, if you want to get to it.
Yes.
If you want to look at the etymology of the word. But what he's demanding is you got to love everybody, or they're going to put a gun to your head.
That's right. It is a gun in the room, and the reason why it is not charity when a person is forcing you to give money that you would not on your own give, not because you're not charitable, but because you have decided within your sovereignty that you're going to give your money over here. The government tells you can't do that. They're going to make you give it in the areas where they want the money to be given. That's not what they've done there. Is taking charity away from you. In fact, they've even eliminated the impulse, which is what I see in my neighborhood when I go back to my old neighborhood. I don't see the charity that was there when I was growing up, because what they did was they even killed the impulse of charity. And they made of the persons they took it from, they made them sacrificial animals, because you're forced to give money, which means they're forcing you to enlist your humanity in the service of others who mean nothing in your life, and people to whom you would not be paying homage to if there was no gun at your head, and followed by the possibility of a jail term if you don't comply. Force.
John Paul Sartre said that, in one of his plays, he said that the hell is other people. When there's a scenario where these people are thinking that, well, you're not being charitable enough, we're going to force you to be more charitable because we think you should be more charitable. That's truly ironically, he was on the left, he was aligned with the left. Mm-hmm. He's actually, this kind of action makes life more unbearable. Mm-hmm. That what you produce is not yours anymore. Somebody else who deems you of having too much is going to hold a gun to your head and ridicule you, put you in prison, whatever, so they can get more from you.
Yes.
And but you're not supposed to protest.
Now, and if you protest, you protest in vain, because your voice has no credibility when the people that are really tyrannical in terms of using force against your own interests don't give you any option, because force eliminates options. It doesn't create more opportunity to move into a space. They close that space out and force you into a space that they want you to comply with the idea that in back of it is prison. Is what you're facing. John, how much time we have? Because I want to talk a little bit about
About 6 minutes.
about 6 minutes. Okay, I do want to talk about this article that I did today on the Facebook, because I want to get more people to get into watching this program and then watching what we do on Facebook, which is a larger network, and maybe we can bring this conversation to both forums and interchange the ideas of others who are not familiar with the program, and some of the person on the program not familiar with Facebook, and we can kind of get the channels interactive, so that we don't have one viewership and then one readership, but the two becomes one and the same. That's our goal, to unite the vision and those who have a vision out there in both arenas. I just think we got to get better at what we're doing here, and if we're going to play the political game, and we're going to use politics to our benefit and not the benefit of the ruling class, the political elite, we're going to have to get better at how we master the political process. And until we get to the point, and we are eventually going to get to the point of dealing with incumbency, because that's the biggest problem that we have in Washington, among a lot of other problems, is that incumbency automatically means that we are in fact installing tyrants at some point into into the power center, and we got to stop enabling them to stay there until they, like Young did in Florida, and Laudenberg did in New Jersey, and some of the others have done, where they're dying in office. And John Boehner's not going to leave. Dingle is running right ahead of the grave. He didn't have anything to offer. 58 years of age, man can barely move. I bet you if you watch him, he's probably coming in a wheelchair to get in this seat. When you never see him standing up, because and I wish they would let these persons just walk across. We can see how disabled they are. John McCain, every time you see him, he's standing or he's sitting down somewhere. You never see these guys walking, because they don't want you to see how decrepit they are. Because when you turn 70 something in your late 70s, early 80s, you don't have the step that you once had. And people can see that and say, "Oh, wait a minute. What does that also invite the argument and maybe the thought that maybe some senility is set in also? I mean, just not his bone. Maybe something is going on upstairs, but they don't. They don't want you to make that connection. So you're sitting down, standing, never moving around, so we can see the debilitation set in, because age brings with it certain things. Here's what I wanted to mention before I get off the air. I did an article today because I wanted to take on the left, which is always doing this name calling about who is and who's not in Uncle Tom. They have all the monopoly on that term. And what I tried to do was to go back into history and examine the term. And I think I did something that no one, in fact, I know no one has done this before, and that is to set out how the term has no application in terms of there being any quote-unquote sellouts in slavery. Now, they're going to be very surprised when they read that I took away the whole argument that Uncle Tom doesn't even exist as they were using it back in slavery. Not only because that's not what Harriet Beecher Stowe in her novel that she wrote in 1852 meant when she wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, but also because there are no slaves in a position to sell any slaves out during slavery. Now, that's going to create a lot of problems. But my premise is this, that rather than looking at those slaves that ran back and told the master that some of those slaves, like Gabriel Prowse and Denmark Vesey, were plotting against slavery, Denmark Vesey and Gabriel Prowse had no right to inform those slaves of what they were doing if they were not on board with the uprising, because by them being told about it and knowing about it, they made them complicit in it. And that complicity is what they were protecting. They weren't trying to sabotage the uprising. What they were doing was, in fact, maintaining the fact that we didn't plan this. Keep that stuff to yourself. And if you notice it, and this is the thing that none of the other so-called scholars have done, is that they have not picked up on the fact that when Nat Turner, that came behind Gabriel Prosser and Denmark Vesey, when Nat Turner came behind them and rose up, because he only told a certain number of people that he was getting ready to rise up against slavery, when they finally rose up, not a single one of those persons in those houses where they rose up was so much as slapped, because Nat Turner knew there was no malice there. And that's a point that not even Malcolm X picked up. That's what I wanted to say today. So I want you to read that post. I'm doing a two-parter on it. And you're reading something in that post that has never been said before. And I want you to stay tuned to that, and also stay tuned to what we do here at flinttalkradio.com. I think we're running out of time, so I'm going to, John, I'm going to sign off right now. I think we're through with the program today. Is that true? Want you to, as always, follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow. Until next week, we'll see you next time.